The thing that is all too often underrated is proper research. If you do a good brand survey, you can get the consumer to tell you what they want. They can give you a blueprint if you know how to use this information.
Hey there, James here, and you're listening to the Own the Moment podcast, the show where we explore the complex and always evolving landscape of marketing, advertising, and branding, and try to get to the bottom of what it means to be a truly memorable brand. The Own the Moment podcast is brought to you by Como Technologies, a self-service, complete customer engagement platform that helps you cut through the noise to truly connect with your customers and retain and grow those connections over time. With Como, you can build and deploy new campaigns, activations, promotions, and programs in days, not months, and our software is used by some of the world's biggest consumer brands, from Heineken to Budget, Goodman Fielder, Foxtel, JLL, Williams Racing, and McDonald's. Learn more at como.tech. Today's guest is John Lyons, a business director at Gasp, one of the most interesting agencies going around. John has spent a career in brand loyalty and consumer promotions and has designed programs for the likes of Lego, Hasbro, and Manchester United. We explored why most brand loyalty is nothing more than inertia and laziness, the two biggest mistakes brands make when designing loyalty programs, and what it would take for John to abandon his favourite toilet paper brand. A sentence I never thought I'd utter on this podcast. John was a great guest with a ton of engaging war stories and learnings from his long career in marketing. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. John Lyons, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure, James. Really looking forward to it.
I want to start with the first question, which is brand loyalty real, or is it just something we talk about in marketing teams and boardrooms?
Oh boy. Okay, so you've started nice and easy. It is real. I think the key thing with brand loyalty is that it's not the same as human relational loyalty. So there is no monogamous loyalty to brands. Even the most loved brands in the world, and as you know, my last role was at one of the most loved brands in the world, Lego. There is no monogamous loyalty. People who buy Lego will buy Playmobil. But that doesn't mean they're not loyal to that brand. So I believe there is brand loyalty. I don't think it's necessarily the case that all brand loyalty is built on anything other than inertia. Some of it is. I will buy the same brand of chewing gum every time I go into a store. It's not because I love that brand. It's not because I feel any connection to the brand, but I know that brand is going to give me what I need. And that's fine. From a marketing perspective, that for me works as loyalty. When I go and buy clothes, I think more about the brands I choose say something about me. So there is more of a connection there. And I think with something like Lego, for example, or even something like Nike. And I'm not a sports brand wearer. I'm an old guy these days, but people do buy into that brand, and that they feel a connection to the brand above and beyond just walking into a sneaker store and picking something up and it happening to be Nike.
Yeah, it's interesting. You had this. I found this quote on your LinkedIn. You said, loyalty isn't for all categories and it isn't for all brands, but when done well, it can be killer. And I think that's interesting there. Maybe there's something. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit. There's something you said there around sort of the identity piece, or I don't know. We had a webinar just this week actually in Sydney about loyalty, and one of the things we talked about was belief and belonging. And maybe for a lot of people, Lego, most probably with their children, play some sort of central role in that part of their lives. And maybe you could say the same for sports brands and Nike. But to use your example with chewing gum, is it possible to build loyalty in those sort of, I don't know what we want to call them, those categories where maybe that identity piece is sort of less obvious. What's your view on that? Can you build loyalty in, I don't know, toilet paper, shampoo?
100%, 100%.
Chewing gum.
But I think you need to start from the basis of what is loyalty. And when you're talking about, I guess, products that aren't necessarily part of your lifestyle or how you want to project yourself. Loyalty is repeat purchase from a pure statistical marketing perspective. So funnily enough, I am loyal to my toilet paper brand. I buy the same brand every single time because I know what I'm getting. And it's I think for most consumers, and the whole point of branding and the whole point of marketing is to shortcut decision making. So if I'm stood in the, the toilet paper aisle, here we go. We're talking toilet paper today, James. Thank you. If I'm stood in the toilet paper aisle, rather than me having to investigate every package and have a look at the pros and cons, all the rational reasons for purchasing, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go for the one that I know does the job I like. I'm a Cushelle man, so I know that's going to feel the way I want it to feel. I know it's going to. I'm not going to put my finger through it in the wrong moment. So I am loyal to that brand. I will buy that every single time. Other than here today and right now, does it represent anything to do with my lifestyle? No, you've made me do it here. But yeah, so I'm not going to be out there kind of championing the cause or wearing Cushelle sneakers or kind of baseball caps. But it's my choice. It's my go-to choice. I am loyal to that brand.
Do you think? Sorry, John, go on.
No, I was going to say. I mean, with a lot of these with a lot of these non-lifestyle or non-projective brands or products, it's not like you're not going to buy a rival brand if your brand isn't there. So if I go into the supermarket and Cushelle isn't there, there's 2 or 3 other brands that I know will be fine. When it's there, so when you've got the physical availability, that's what I will buy. And I've said in the past, kind of, I'm a diabetic. When I go into a store, I'm in a cafe and I want something to drink, I know that the silver tin with the red little ribbon on it, the Diet Coke, is going to satisfy my needs. There have been times when I was getting used to being a diabetic where I'd pick up something forgetting that it's sugar-based. So I know exactly what I'm going for Diet Coke. If I'm thirsty and they don't have Diet Coke, I'll buy a Diet Pepsi. I'll buy a water. I'll buy a cup of tea. So it's not like I'm going to miss out. I'm not that loyal as I would be to a partner or a family member or a friend, that I'm not going to go elsewhere, but it will be my default go-to.
That's really, really interesting. Do you see, I mean, obviously, on your side of the world, in the agency world, do you see brands in some of those, I like that way of putting it, sort of non-lifestyle, non-projective brands. Have you seen an uptick in those sorts of brands wanting to pursue, I guess, more of that, identity-based, purpose-driven branding work?
I mean, yes, but I don't necessarily go along with it. I think it's very easy to look at other brands or other categories and say I want some of that, but again, not to understand that's not really the needs of your consumer. And it's one of the things. I've been agency side and client side in my career, but certainly agency side, so many agencies are looking at clients and I guess project types that suit their business. So one of the things that every agency I've been at looks at, okay, what's our percentage of retained rather than project-based business? And at the end of the day, that might work for us. That might be the best outcome for an agency. Of course it is, to know what you've got coming up, but it's not necessarily what our clients need. So I wouldn't say I've worked on loyalty programs where they've been misplaced, but I've seen plenty where people have gone, oh, okay, we want loyalty. That buys people in, that gets us data, that gets repeat purchase. Let's do a loyalty program for our chewing gum. And it's just not going to make a massive difference. I mean, one thing I will say is that loyalty programs, the positives of loyalty programs, and we're talking programs rather than the concept of loyalty, aren't necessarily just transactional. There's data, there's building up marketing databases, there's all sorts of positive outcomes for it, which is a great thing. But if you're looking at loyalty and a loyalty program or a loyalty scheme as a way of generating more recurring income, you really need to consider your category, and you really need to consider your brand, because it's not going to be for everyone. And ultimately, the most important thing is Byron Sharp's physical availability. If I can't pick up the thing that you want me to be loyal to where I normally do my shopping, I'm not going to buy it.
It's funny, I had Tom Goodwin on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I asked him, what does he think the most sort of underrated trend in marketing was, and I'll ask you that question later on. And he said, just making it easy to buy stuff. Yeah. And it's like such a simple, but really right when you sort of, and the way he described it with, even if you just go and look at sort of, ads on Instagram nowadays, I mean, a lot of them, it's not that easy to go and buy the thing that you're looking at. So I think that was a great insight. So John, you've worked on loyalty programs for brands like Lego, Hasbro, and, even sports teams like Manchester United, which is really exciting. What are the characteristics then of really successful programs? What are the sort of elements and key, I guess, characteristics of when it works?
I mean, this is going to sound kind of fairly obvious, but I think the first thing is to be honest with yourself about how people purchase your brand. So if we look at Lego, with Hasbro, I worked on Nerf perks, so Nerf blasters. Manchester United was more of a CRM than a loyalty specific thing, but similar. And it's looking at your audience and understanding them and not hiding from the data. So what we knew at the Lego Group is that it is more than just a one-off purchase. So yes, there are lots of other players in the market. Nobody is monogamous. Jerry Dakin, who I know quite well, is a huge Lego fan, and actually I spoke to him before I interviewed for the role at Lego. But he also buys Playmobil. He's a collector. He likes things, and we know we knew that was the case at Lego. So it's a collectible. It's slightly different from pretty much anything else I think in the market, in that every piece of Lego that you've ever owned will work with every piece of Lego that you will ever buy. So yes, there are sets, but it's kind of as far away from single-use plastic as you're ever going to get. You can build and rebuild and constantly recycle it. So that's not the case for kind of almost every other brand in many ways, but there are reasons why people buy it. There are things that people buy into. And interestingly, you mentioned earlier about kind of playing with your kids. Actually, the majority of money spent on Lego is adults buying from themselves. That sprung up massively during lockdown. As you can imagine, it's a 3D.
That's so surprising.
3D puzzle. It's a way of satisfying your creativity. It's a way of killing time, and you have something great looking after it. And here's me pointing over my shoulder at a whole bunch of Lego stuff that I've built, some by myself, some with my son. But it gives you more than just the product. And again, if you look at Nerf. There's not just a single blaster, there's the pellets, there's all sorts of things with Nerf. And interestingly, on that program, the agency I was at launched that program several years ago. And at that time, what Hasbro had was a very popular product that they were not selling direct to consumer, of course. Lego Group do. Right. They have their own stores as well as selling through retail chains. But they didn't really have a full understanding of what their customer base was, what their wants and needs were. And part of the reason for them commissioning Nerf perks was to get a better understanding and a first first point of contact with their consumer base. And they learnt so much about it. There's as an example, you'd probably expect 13-year-old kids and frat boys that they're going to be people that buy Nerf. What we found was that one of the most prolific buyers was a middle-aged lawyer. And that wasn't an unusual pattern, but you don't know that unless you're either but connecting one-to-one with the consumer, or doing really good research. So the outcomes are really important. And obviously with Manchester United, it's people buy into their sports clubs in a way that they don't necessarily with CPG brands. But even then, I'm not a Manchester United fan. I now have an affinity with Manchester United, having worked with them and made some really good friends there. but I will watch my team and care. I'll watch other games because I like football. So again, it's not monogamous. Even with that really passionate thing that people do understand, and people have talked about kind of fandoms in terms of sport as opposed to brands. Even with sport, you will still watch the sport if your team isn't involved. So getting away from this idea that brand loyalty is anything like relational loyalty is the first step, and then understanding what it is your customers or your fans want and need from this connection is crucial.
That's really, really interesting. So let's say, so brands that do fit the bill in terms of categories. So, maybe sort of removing, a lot of the CPG and things like we've talked about. What, even in the right category, what mistakes have you seen, brands and marketers and creatives and agencies make when designing loyalty programs? Sort of what are the common missteps in these programs?
I mean, I think there's probably two that really stand out. Number one is overestimating how much the consumer cares. Ultimately, most of us don't walk around thinking about brands all day. I mean, we do in our industry, let's be honest. We walk around thinking about brands and we'll obsess over brands. And the way that I will wander the aisles in a supermarket isn't the way that a normal human being would wander the aisles of a supermarket, because I've got my marketer eyes on. So overestimating the degree of the connection. But I think kind of on a tactical level, the thing that I've seen several times is thinking that a loyalty program is a way of shifting product that people aren't willing to spend their money on. So, I've worked on campaigns in the past where we've had to explain to the client, if people aren't buying that, they're not going to then convert their points that they're getting for purchasing your brand on this. They don't want it. Nobody wants this thing.
Right.
It really is getting into the mindset of what the consumer wants, what they're going to put up with, and what matters to them, rather than just starting with what matters to the business. And I think probably the thing with loyalty is I find that quite often brands will come to the point of, we want a loyalty scheme, without thinking about what question it's answering. Why do you want it? What is it you're looking to achieve? Think of that before deciding that loyalty is the way forward. And as I said before, some brands, some categories it works with. I'm a big fan of malt whiskey. I have my favourites, but I will buy various single malt whiskies from time to time, and I've been to distilleries. I've been to my favourite distilleries. You buy beyond just the product. And so that's a category where I think it can work. Lego, obviously, is a category where I think it can work. Nothing is going to change my buying pattern in terms of my toilet paper, however loyal I am, and I'm loyal. I love that little koala, but nothing's going to make me buy more of that toilet paper.
That's really, really interesting. John, I want to shift from loyalty to promotions. You founded an agency that was eventually acquired by a global promotional marketing agency, and then later you became a sales and marketing director there, and the agency was NDL. So, promotions is obviously something that's, very close to our hearts here at Como. So, I'm curious to know where you think we're at today in terms of sort of digital promotions. What's working, what's not working, what's changed in the world that is shifting how brands should think about, I guess, short-term promotions and activations today? What's the state of the union?
Well, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things there is that that marketing science would appear to tell us that promotions are not good, but actually, good promotional marketers understand that we can work within the realms of Ehrenberg Bass and come up with a good promotion. So, I saw something recently, and where there was a promotion designed to highlight a new range. And the prize was the new range. And that has never made any sense to me. You're basically putting people off from buying it because they think they might win it. So understanding that how can we connect to people in a way that is relevant to the brand and relevant to them with the promotion? So prize promotions rather than price promotions, for me, are far more important, far more effective. And the last agency I was at, NDL, the last promotions agency, the NDL group, that they've built a fantastic brand off of the back of prize and winner management. They in the UK certainly they created the category of prize and winner management, and everything is about making sure that whichever brand you are, when you run a promotion, your customers go away having the best experience possible. It's white glove treatment. It's travel. It's money can't buy prizes, and ultimately it's kind of leaving everyone with such a great feeling about the brand, but not giving them the thing that we're promoting, because that stops people spending
trying
money.
to sell them.
Yeah. So and with digital promotions, it's fascinating because it doesn't really change the model. It doesn't change how humans think, but it does affect the speed and it affects the volume. And it affects the model. There are things that you can do with digital that you just couldn't really do successfully offline. So, things like UGC, user generated content, giving people the opportunity to, let's say, upload a design, and going back to our kind of talk about the toilet paper. At NDL Group, I worked with a brand called Regina Blitz, and it's a household paper, so it's not kitchen roll, it's more than that. It's kind of it's a brilliant product, and it's one that's the minute I got my hands on it, I've never stopped buying it because I'm a nerd like that. But again, if I walk in the supermarket and they don't have it, I'll buy plenty. But we did a number of promotions around Christmas where we gave people the opportunity to design the Christmas wrapping, and it brought people into it. And they got the chance to win the best Christmas. So there was, I don't know, whatever the fund was, the prize fund. We at NDL we called them up. We helped them spend their money in the way that was best for them. Whether that was having a 6-foot Christmas tree from Norway, or buying lots of presents, decorating the house, cleaning the house, getting everything prepared for the best Christmas you can have. So that's about building memories, and it's about building positive associations with the brand rather than giving stuff away, and really that kind of thing, or referral, friend get friend, particularly on social. It's very easy to kind of have a campaign where if you like this and share with a friend and they like it, you both get something, and it's amplified. So we get the amplification effect of promotions as well. So I think it's really that engaging the consumer and finding a way to almost make them a brand ambassador, even though that's a kind of slightly wanky term. But we're enabling them to share positively about the brand.
Yeah, and I think there's a bunch of other things there. Things like zero-party data, first-party data. Obviously, yes. We all know sort of, that whole world is shifting, and I think Google have finally committed to killing off third-party cookies next year. And so I think bringing consumers in and having them sort of participate in sharing preferences, feedback, whatever it might be, I think is really, really interesting. And so, you've obviously done a lot of work with retail over the years, and obviously NDL was big in that world. What is it about retail that you love, and why is it such a compelling area to work in marketing-wise, I guess, packaged goods and retail more generally?
I mean, I think part of it is that it's kind of so raw and so challenging. I mean, you can literally walk into a store and watch people make their decisions. In B2B, you don't get that opportunity. We know in B2B, people will, 9 times out of 10, they'll sit there and do some desk research. And yeah, of course, you can do research in that. And a lot of the work I do now at Gasp is quite a lot of it is based on B2B marketing, and it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. But being able to just walk into a store and look at all of the options that a consumer might be able to make in a particular category. So, we talked about toilet paper earlier. Let's stick to toilet paper. It's the classic example that people use when putting down loyalty. But if you walk in the toilet paper aisle, you can see all of the brands there. You can see what stands out, what don't stand out, and you can watch consumers make their choices. And 9 times out of 10, the choice is made before they get there, which is Ehrenberg Bass's mental availability. And likewise for me, my choice is made before I get there, unless if they don't have it, at which point I'm stuck. That's not the case for all categories. I will... there are some things, I don't know, let's talk about snacks potentially, where I'll browse and I'll have a look to see if there's anything that's kind of slightly more interesting. Not everybody does this. And maybe this is because I'm a marketer and I love the idea of retail. But I'll spend more time looking at some categories than others. And one of the things that has always driven my family kind of mad is whenever we're abroad or in a store that we maybe don't have access to locally, I'll disappear and I'll be wandering the aisles just looking at stuff and people. And that's why I love retail. You see the stuff, you see the people, and you see all of the things that we as marketers spend our lives poring over and obsessing over. You kind of see it out there in the battlefield, and you see how minute a difference all of that makes. But that minute difference can, to the bottom line, make all the difference. And so, you're watching the battle in play, and I love that. I find that fascinating. I've always been a people watcher, but watching people make their choices and seeing actually how few choices they really make in retail, as opposed to before they even get there, and subconsciously more often than not as well, fascinates me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So going back to this idea of availability and making it easy to buy and sort of, making choices in the supermarket, what other tips do you have for brands, in those categories for, how should brands think about being easy to buy, or maybe not just easy to buy, but maybe the other side of that, which is sort of interesting, jumping off the shelf, standing out? What are the sort of tactics and tools?
I mean, the reality is that most purchase decisions are made way before people get to the aisle. And so, it's Burnett and Phil talk about the long and the short, and the long being kind of brand marketing and making that mental availability, putting in the mind that a particular product will be the answer to whatever it is you need when you need something from that category. So category entry points. So it all starts in the brain. It all starts way in the brain. And, kind of when I go back to my early career as a digital marketer, you're able to track so much and you end up obsessing about it. But actually, the digital funnel doesn't start digitally. No funnel starts digitally. It all starts up here. So, what is in my mind? How can we get in someone's mind that when they... I'm not going to go into the toilet paper example because that will get quite grim. But let's talk about soft drink. So let's go back to me and Diet Coke. I already know when I want something to drink when I'm out, and maybe it's not an alcoholic drink or maybe it's not a hot drink. Those are slightly different things. And sometimes you fancy a hot drink. Here I am with my coffee. Sometimes you fancy an alcoholic drink. Last night I was out getting hammered. But if I'm thirsty. The first thing I will look for normally is a Diet Coke. That's already that meal is already done. It's only when it's not there that I then look for the alternative. So it's making the connection with consumers before they even get to the purchase decision that your brand, your product is a suitable option. And that's the first step is honestly just making sure that people connect your brand to that category entry point. If I don't see Diet Coke as an option when I'm thirsty, I'm not going to buy it when I'm thirsty. And it's kind of everything before you get to the aisle that builds that kind of connection. And then when you try it and you like it, then that's kind of where you start to build a bit of a habit and maybe loyalty or repeat purchase.
Can that only be done, that sort of mental availability, can that only be achieved via sort of the long of it, brand, or talk me through how should brands think about sort of building that availability? Is it, like I said, is it only brand that can get you there?
Primarily is. However, there are some there are short-term tactics and promotional tactics that can and do work. So one of the best tactics out there is sampling. If you've got a new product in a category that people
Right.
don't know, don't recognize, don't consider as an option, sampling is a way of testing their well, I guess testing their taste in some ways. And I was actually, funnily enough, last week I was judging the Alliance of Independent Agency Awards, and the category that I was working on was promotional techniques. And some of the best ones in there were sampling, and it's about getting people at the right time and giving them the opportunity to, I guess, create a new mental connection to a brand. And sampling is a great way of doing that. I'm not a great believer in discounting. You have to do it sometimes, and normally when as a brand, when you have to do it, it's to earn shelf space. It's to play nicely with the retailers, because ultimately, if you don't have the retailers, you don't have that physical availability. But if there's a promotion that will catch people's eye and just one time only get them to try a different brand that they will then maybe add to their kind of category set or their short list in the category, then that's a way of kind of getting ahead of the game without just the brand building. But having said that, if that happens 2 years ago and they see nothing of your brand in between and they don't just see it on the shelf, you've lost that kind of connection in the first place. So it really is, when I talked about not being monogamous, loyalty not being monogamous, I should say, rather than humans. When I talk about loyalty not being monogamous, it's most people will have, whether they realize it or not, a kind of a short list of things that they will buy from a category. And you might have your preference. Some people will call that loyalty. Some people will say it's not, but I think it is. Diet Coke is my preference. If they don't have that, I'm a diabetic, so I'm not going to go full fat Coke. I might go Diet Pepsi. I might go water. I might go tea. There are all these options. Kind of 7-Up free and Sprite Zero or 7-Up Zero, whichever way they are. But I've got that kind of category shortlist in my mind. And what you want to do as a brand is be part of that first. If you're not considered as part of that, then you've got no chance of winning in the category. So, sampling is a great way of doing that. Price promotions is a great way of doing that. If you have to do a price promotion, it can get you there to start with, but there's not a great deal of evidence that it will keep people on board if that's all you're doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think for me, all of that just speaks to the power of the long and the short of it as an insight. I mean, it's really sort of just such a powerful yet so simple idea that seems to make a lot of sense. John, I'd like to move on to the quick fire round and start with a question, which is, what is your favorite marketing campaign of all time?
That I've worked on, or just in general?
In general.
Okay.
Any brand.
Oh, wow. I mean, one that's absolutely blown me away, and it's fairly recent, and I wasn't involved with it, but I'm a convert, is Yorkshire tea. So Yorkshire tea in the UK, we're British. We drink a lot of tea, right? So, and forever there's been two brands, and they dominated the market to the extent that they kind of didn't need to do much, and they dominate the market. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, this upstart Yorkshire tea came about, and the way that they position themselves as it's a proper tea. So Yorkshire's got this whole thing of it's Yorkshire, it's straightforward, it's takes no nonsense. They had these brilliant campaigns that continue to today that they've used celebrity, but they've used it in such a way that it's kind of broke through and told a story, and it's now number one in the category. Can you imagine going from nowhere to number one in the category, particularly that kind of category in this kind of country, this kind of consumer base? But it's been, I wouldn't say relentless because that sounds negative, but it's been consistent, and they've built this consistent kind of volume where now people would just assume that Yorkshire tea's always been the go-to tea, and it's not. It's kind of new, but it's been amazing the way that they've done that, and it's I've just been massively impressed by that. And I mean, I'm drinking coffee right now, but when I'm in the office, I drink Yorkshire tea.
I think that's a fantastic example. It reminds me of, we had Jamie Pete on from McCann, who's worked with Aldi for many years on the podcast, and he was, sort of almost telling a similar story about sort of Aldi and how they used, I think we even called the episode the power of perfect positioning to, to go from sort of, I think less than 2% to over 10% market share in 20 years in like an extremely mature and well-established category. So
I mean, it's an amazing
a testament to great marketing.
Aldi and obviously Lidl is the other competitor, but they've absolutely demolished the lazy, and I'm going to call it lazy, or maybe that's unfair. It probably isn't lazy, but I guess kind of comfortable position in the category of the market leaders, and they've gone from nowhere to huge. And one of the things that I've found fascinating over the last few years, and sorry, Jamie, this isn't Aldi, it's Lidl, but over here in the UK, we've never really had an advertising Super Bowl. That one big event that they have in the US, and all the advertisers are there, and the whole industry watches it. Until John Lewis started Christmas advertising, and that's become our Super Bowl. And what's interesting is, obviously, John Lewis decided to change agencies, and that's a questionable decision from my perspective. But they invented the category. They've had great success for it. Lidl have come in and Aldi have come in, and they found ways of reworking that. So actually, we've gone from John Lewis winning Christmas every year to Kevin the Carrot winning Christmas every year, because there's been an opportunity to change the narrative and to have a different perspective and just barge through and be brave and bold, and it's been fantastic success.
I couldn't agree more. What's the most overrated trend in marketing right now?
It's AI. It's AI. It's funny because I quite like it. I think it's useful. I think it can be fun. I did a talk a few weeks ago where actually I was talking. So I was invited to talk at an event on creativity, and stupidly I connected them with Andy Nairn from Lucky Generals, who is not just a super talented guy, but is an amazing speaker. So I don't know if you've ever seen him speak, but he is stunning.
No.
Get him on the pod. But he is brilliant. And I kind of connected the organisers with him, and then they asked me to speak as well. I'm like, shit, I'm speaking on the same. I'm basically on the undercard of Andy Nairn. What am I going to do? So I kind of thought, well, the only thing I can do is to just to flip it. So I've gone to this talk on creativity, and my talk was I called it "Creativity is Dead," because what else am I going to do? But what was funny was and I kind of built this whole thing of here's what the traditional heroes of advertising and marketing say about marketing science, and here's what the marketing scientists do, and then obviously tie it all up at the end. And marketing science makes the case for creativity. But I had a play with ChatGPT to get some quotes. So I was like, okay, I want to get some anti-science marketing quotes, and I got some brilliant quotes. And then I went into Midjourney and I kind of uploaded images of these heroes, Dave Trott and kind of George Lois. I've uploaded these, and I've created these images of them kind of represented as the past, which they're not. That was the narrative. Only to then, at the last minute, the day before the talk, think, oh, I better double check those quotes, and found out that none of them were real. ChatGPT had invented the quotes, but I got some brilliant images that really broke through in the talk and kind of helped create that. And there are people talking about everyone's jobs are going to be at risk with AI, which I personally don't believe. To me, no. AI, it has the potential to be a fantastic labor-saving device. And in the same way that when I first started working in marketing, a lot of my clients were in entertainment, cinema, DVD, probably VHS back then. And a lot of the artwork was hand paintings, kind of those really cheesy hand paintings and stuff. You don't get that anymore because you don't need it. And I think we're going to see similar with AI, where there's just better ways to do things, but it's not going to take away the creative. It's going to become a labor-saving device. But there's so much talk about it at the moment, and every day you see half a dozen things on LinkedIn telling us here are the 10 reasons that your life is going to change and you need to get out of Dodge. Nah, not having it.
No, it was funny. I actually was just before we started recording. I think it was on Campaign Live. Someone started an agency now in the UK, sort of a generative AI agency, and I thought it's sort of interesting to see how that will fare. 12 months on.
Well, I mean,
don't know if any of the
metaverse
agencies
they might be able to cash in. And that
yeah, look, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I guess it's funny looking back on sort of the metaverse trend over the last 12 months, and
I love the fact that
a lot of money was made.
Oh, totally, and we're looking back at it. It never happened. It might happen, but it's not actually happened. But we're looking back at it. It's and I'm old enough to kind of been around and working in digital during the .com boom and bust. And I'm quite old school in terms of my approach, even though I started with digital, but I don't understand how this is going to make money. Where's the value for consumers? Has always been my guiding light. So I probably could have cashed in. Doing some of my early kind of digital stuff, design, web design, whatever it was, building sites, campaigns. I probably could have cashed in and cashed out quite early by taking equity in some of the clients, but I just didn't see the longevity in it. And there are people with better lives than me, richer than me, that did. Well done, or that didn't, but saw the opportunity. But I always look at these things in terms of why would anybody care? And if it's smoke and mirrors, then I'm kind of not interested.
Yeah, I think that's very, very noble. All right, on the other side of the coin, then, what's the marketing tactic that no one's talking about? I guess we could frame it as the underrated tactic. Still underrated.
That's a really good question. And I'm going to turn it on its head a little bit, because I think the underrated tactic isn't a tactic. I think it's diagnosis. I think the thing that is all too often underrated is proper research. Actually, if you do a good brand survey, if you do a good brand tracking survey, you can get the consumer to tell you, or the consumers to tell you what they want from your brand, what they want from the category, who they prefer, why they prefer them, what turns them on, what turns them off. Basically, they can give you a blueprint if you know how to use this information, and it's so straightforward. And at Gasp, where I am now, that's what we do. Everything we do starts with research, and it's the classic thing. Kind of Neil McElroy's memo was 1931, I think, and it introduced kind of brand management and the idea of doing research, then strategy, then tactics. I think too often people just jump straight to tactics, and they can work. Don't get me wrong, they can absolutely work. But if you've done the research, you can fine tune the tactics and get much bigger input and much better outcomes. So for me, the most important tactic that's not being talked about is not a tactic; it's research.
Right. I don't know if you follow John James. He hosts the Champagne Strategy podcast. He had a tweet the other day, which I'm just going to read on this. I thought it was brilliant. He said, "Without constant research fed into the creation of a continuous feedback loop, you're just another marketer churning out content, hoping for a winner." And I think there's a lot to that. So I think that was a great one. Last question, John. Who is the most interesting marketer in the world right now?
Oh boy. Most interesting marketer. That's
maybe your favourite.
It's. I mean, there's kind of a number of players in there for me, and it's not the superstar CMOs that we've kind of seen and read about, and that go to Cannes every year. The people that fascinate me are the people that are either doing the work or shining a light on understanding. So actually, Jenny Romaniak at Erebel Bass, she basically championed the idea of distinctive assets. But her recent book that I'm going through at the moment is about brand health. It's brand tracking and doing better brand tracking. And I heard her on a podcast. I heard her on the podcast that my agency produces, Call to Action. I don't get to hear it before it goes out, unfortunately. But I was listening to it, and it blew my little mind. Just on the podcast, some of the simple truths that she was putting out there that make such a difference to the outcome. So I'm a huge fan of Jenny. I think I mentioned Andy Nairn earlier. I think the work that Lucky Generals do is amazing, and when he talks about the work, it blows my mind. And the other thing that I absolutely idolize Andy for is, he's got a book, Go Luck Yourself. He does lots of talks around that, which he did at the event I was mentioning earlier. He does all of that for a charity called Commercial Break, which is it's there to make a room for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds to get into the creative industries. And I grew up in public housing, a single parent family. I didn't know what marketing was. I've somehow found my way into this, and I've made a successful career out of it. But I look back at all of the people I grew up with that didn't have the stroke of luck, or I'm not going to kind of humble brag here, but I was a really bright kid. So I made some luck for myself, as Andy would talk about. But sure. I also had luck and opportunity along the way to kind of find my way to where I am now. But I see so many people that are so much brighter than people that have had opportunities that are sitting in the spaces that they could really excel at, didn't get the chance. So I love the fact that he does that as well. And I think probably my industry hero is Rob Schwartz. Gone from being a creative at Shite Day, New York, to being the CEO and now the chairman of TBWA, Shite Day. And it's seeing a creative be able to do that, where we've got so many kind of, I guess, accountants, if you want to be shitty about it. But people that are business people running the big agencies, the big network agencies, to see a creative get there, make a difference, and it's just such an inspiration for me. So I'm a huge fan of Rob Schwartz.
That's brilliant. I think those are all great tips, and that's probably a nice place to wrap up. John, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome, James. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Own the Moment podcast. If you liked this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss upcoming episodes. And to suggest a guest or provide feedback, please visit our dedicated podcast hub at ownthemomentpod.com.